Every now and then a player enters the NFL that totally transforms the way the league operates. And in the early 2000s, a receiver would absolutely change the way players act, bringing their personality and sense of humor into the game, while also playing to unbelievable levels. Chad Johnson redefined what it meant to be an NFL star, and his confidence combined with his entertainment ability left a permanent mark on the league. Today on FootballLore, we go over the life and career of Chad Ochocinco Johnson, his rise to fame, his incredible football career, and the entertainment empire he is building now. If you are excited for the video, please be sure to press the like button and subscribe so we can hit 10,000 subscribers this year. Chad Johnson was born in Miami, Florida in January of 1978. His childhood had some periods of instability. Both of his biological parents would not be there for the young man, and he would spend a majority of his childhood with his grandmother. His mom tried her best to be in her son's life, but Johnson says she did the best she could for the cards she was dealt. He references his grandmother as filling the role of both his mother and his father. His father spent a 20-year bid in prison for drug-related charges. This left a hole in Johnson's life, but it was not something that he would let derail his path to greatness. Instead, he would use his childhood situation to propel himself into a spot where he could take care of his family. Ocho frequently says that living in the past is no way to live, and while he had a hard childhood, he doesn't let that define who he is today. Despite being an elderly woman, his grandma went above and beyond to make sure that Johnson could participate in any activity he needed to. She would take him to soccer practice, football practice, school events. It didn't matter to his grandma. As long as it would help him succeed, she would be there. Ocho was an incredible athlete from a young age and had a deep passion for both soccer and football through high school. Johnson had a period in late high school where he realized there were really only two ways he could make it to the level of success he desired. He either had to fully commit himself to sports and get a scholarship, or turn to the streets. He had many friends that decided to pursue a career dealing drugs, committing robberies, or general petty crime. He knew he did not want to go down that path and really committed to honing in on his craft. Despite having great high school stats, not many colleges were initially interested in Johnson. The area he's from isn't known for producing good academic students, so while he had great athletic talent, it was a question if he could adapt to a college course load. He would attend Langston University for a short time, but wouldn't even play football at the school. In 1997, he transferred across the country to Santa Monica College in California, where he would start his college career. This small community college at the time had two future elite NFL receivers on the team. For the years Chad was in Santa Monica, he was teammates with Panthers legend Steve Smith. It was a grind, and he spent a few seasons leading the program as their best receiver. He played well enough on the field to attract the eyes of a D1 program before his final season. It's important to note how much he dominated while at Santa Monica. There was one year he had 17 receiving touchdowns. While he had certain struggles with academics off the field, it was obvious he could run circles around pretty much everyone on the community college level. And it's honestly surprising it took so long for a major program to take a chance on him. Dennis Erickson had been watching Johnson play while coaching Oregon State University and saw that he would be a great piece to add to the program. He went out of his way to recruit him directly and pretty much stopped short of begging for him to play at OSU. Obviously, this was a step up from a community college team, so Johnson would transfer to Oregon for the 2000 season. This would finally allow him to put himself on the radar of NFL teams, and he would seize the opportunity. Johnson has always been big on living in the moment, and he realized that this year at Oregon State would be his best chance to showcase his abilities. He had spent years grinding in Santa Monica for a chance, and he had finally gotten one. He would play in 12 games and have a 37-catch, 800-yard season with 8 touchdowns. This made him the second best receiver on the team, behind future NFL teammate T.J. Houshmandzadeh. Johnson would break records with the longest touchdown reception in school history, and they would even totally blow out Notre Dame in a bowl game. It was a great year for Johnson, and it put him on the radar of several NFL teams. Even though he had a great year, the fact he had only spent 1 year at a major program meant there was a slim chance he would be an early pick. But he could use the combine to showcase his explosive ability. Unfortunately for Johnson, he would slip while running his 40-yard dash at the combine, and the slow 40 time put off some teams from being interested. This dropped his draft grade from a mid-first round pick to a late first, early second round grade. This would still be a pretty large payday for the young star, and when he was selected by the Cincinnati Bengals with the 36th overall pick in the 2001 NFL draft, He would sign a 4-year, $3 million contract, which was in line for a high second-round pick at the time. While most players go out and start blowing money immediately, Johnson was aware of the fact this money wasn't guaranteed to last. For the first year in the NFL, he actually lived at Paul Brown Stadium to avoid paying housing expenses and stacked his money into investments. He was not afraid to wear fake jewelry and would literally go to Claire's to buy chains. When you play in the NFL, everyone will assume they are real anyways, so you might as well not waste the money. He wasn't caught out in the club spending money on liquor. Instead, he was doing everything he could to make sure it would last. Him living at the stadium the first year also was a big help when it came to him understanding the game. That level of immersion is hard to beat. Many rookie players get so caught up in the lifestyle that football falls by the wayside. But the reverse was true for Johnson. He didn't see a ton of playing time, but he did spend the year taking in as much as he could from veteran players. He would finish his rookie season with 28 catches for 300 yards and a touchdown. While that was a solid rookie season for a second-round pick, it would be his sophomore year that would see a huge breakout in performance. He would have 69 receptions for over 1,100 yards receiving and 5 touchdowns. This made him an offensive star on the Bengals, and it was also the first time he would showcase his personality on the field. Whether it be touchdown celebrations or comments in the media, he found a way to always be on fans' minds. He became one of the best-selling Bengals jerseys and would continue to be through his entire stay in Cincinnati. Even though he had had an incredible 2002 season, he would literally break franchise records the following year. He had 90 receptions for a record 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns. This secured him a spot in the Pro Bowl and also got him paid heavily with a contract extension. When you break franchise records, they tend to give you whatever numbers you want. Just 3 years into the league, he secured himself a 5-year, $26 million extension. That is a ton of cash, but Johnson has always believed in investing a majority of your income to make sure your financial freedom is secured. He did start to have some flashy items, but he maintained that most of the flashy items were either fake or from television income. 2004 would be another 1,000-yard season with 95 receptions and 9 touchdowns. He had established himself as an incredibly hard-to-cover receiver. Alongside his great play came trash talk that got defenses fired up and had fans invested anytime he took the field. A great example of his legendary trash talk was when he decided to create a list throughout the 2005 season called Who Covered 85 and 05. He would be keeping track of what cornerbacks were actually capable of applying pressure to the elite receiver. While this was funny, even people within the Bengals organization got offended by it, with Marvin Lewis giving Ocho a list titled, "Did 85 do everything he could to help the team win today?" Even with this drama, it had no effect on Johnson's on-the-field performance. He managed to surpass the franchise record with 1,400 receiving yards from 97 receptions with 9 touchdowns. He made another Pro Bowl, and while the Bengals grew frustrated with his off-field antics from time to time, there was really no argument over whether or not he was a crucial piece of the offense. 2006 was another great season for Johnson, with 87 receptions for 1,300 yards and 7 touchdowns. This was another critical year in Johnson's career because it was the first year he ever had Ochocinco on the back of his jersey. He had declared that for Hispanic Heritage Month, he would be called Ochocinco. And in response to him wearing it on his jersey, the NFL fined him $5,000 because it wasn't his real name. Johnson began the process to legally change his name after this game, but the process would take a few years to come into effect. One thing about the 2006 season is that he was hindered by some injuries that kept his production down in the back half of the year. He was still growing in popularity wildly with fans, and it showed when he was the most popular single player in fan voting for that year's Pro Bowl. He had national notoriety at this point, and all the trash talk he was spewing off the field was backed up with receiving yards and touchdowns on it. You can't argue with numbers, and it was certainly true that he was producing a lot of them. The 2007 season got off to an explosive start when, after scoring his first touchdown in Week 1, Ocho went to the sidelines and grabbed a future Hall of Fame jacket to wear. This was obviously supposed to be funny banter, but it didn't stop the media from dissecting it endlessly, trying to imply Ocho had done it to mock the Hall of Fame. I think the truth is that Johnson was just always trying to do what he thought would be entertaining to the fans. He was a true showman in that he wanted to keep everyone entertained, like some type of modern Roman gladiator gladiator. This didn't stop the team from continuing to have issues with his behavior. Johnson was called selfish and not willing to do what he needed to do to help the team overall. This led to him feeling isolated and not attached to team activities. The team had put up with his behavior because he was their best receiver, but his teammate TJ had in recent years started to have similar production. This also extended to his relationship with quarterback Carson Palmer and head coach Marvin Lewis. Things got so bad that apparently Johnson threatened to sit out the entire season. Ocho even went on TV and told the Commanders owner Dan Snyder to call him and get him out of Cincinnati. They would offer a trade for him. Shortly after that the Bengals would turn down. Johnson eventually demanded a trade outright, and this did little to help smooth out the issues that had flared up between himself and his teammates. In the first preseason game, he was still a Bengal and tore his labrum, which usually requires a prolonged rest period. Johnson decided to play the season with the torn labrum, which was against most doctors' guidance. It didn't help his production that Carson Palmer had been taken out by injury, and this led to Ocho having the worst season of his career as a starting receiver. He had just 53 catches for 540 yards and 4 touchdowns. The next year in 2009, Ocho didn't show up for voluntary camp workouts, and more teams displayed interest in a potential trade. The Bengals were still not willing to budge, and he remained in Cincinnati for even more time. During this season, he did start trying to make up for his behavior to Bengals fans by doing fan meetups and apologizing directly to the city. He did manage to have an increase in production, with 72 catches for just over 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns. He made yet another Pro Bowl and cemented himself into the greatest receiver of his era conversations. While at this point Johnson was riding high, it would just be a few more years before he would find himself out of the NFL entirely. The 2010 season, he had lots of projects going on off the field that distracted him from football. I mean, the man was insanely busy through this time period. He released an app, did Dancing with the Stars, a talk show with Terrell Owens, a reality dating show, was on the WWE, and was in several commercials, all in 2010 alone. Obviously, this was good for his bank account and diversifying his income, but it led to yet another disappointing year on the field. He had just 67 receptions for 831 yards and 4 touchdowns. At this point, Cincinnati realized they were never going to get back to his production from the mid-2000s, so they decided to actually trade him from the team. He was traded to the New England Patriots in time for the 2011 season. Many fans thought the combination of Brady and Ocho would be dangerous for everyone in the league. The problem was, he started in just 3 games for the Patriots. He did see playtime all year, but his lack of inclusion to the offense meant his production had dropped quite considerably. He had his worst year in the NFL since becoming a starter, when he had just 15 receptions for 276 yards and 1 touchdown. He did manage to have a touchdown reception in the Super Bowl, but the Patriots would lose to the Giants 21-17. He also had spent some of his offseason trying to be a professional soccer player when he had a 4-day trial for Sporting Kansas City of Major League Soccer. This distracted from football, but we have to give him credit for being an elite athlete enough to participate in multiple professional sports. He has also since played on contracts with the Boca Raton Football Club. As recently as 2019, his talent on the football field apparently transferred to the soccer pitch as well. While this is an admirable talent, it didn't do much to convince the Patriots to keep him on the roster. At this point, the money the Patriots owed Johnson was not worth the production they were getting out of him on the field. So they did what eventually all teams do with aging talent and released him in the 2011 postseason. Johnson still felt like he had gas in the tank, and this was a fair perspective. He had a season on the Patriots to get his body back in shape without taking a beating as a primary option, but he had been involved in the game enough to squash any questions of his ability to operate in an NFL environment. This meant he had plenty of interest from other teams who were looking for a receiver to add depth to their offense. The Miami Dolphins ended up signing him just 4 days after he was released from the Patriots, but Johnson's arrest for alleged domestic violence in 2012 would force the Dolphins to release Johnson before he played a game for the team. At this point, he was pretty much considered radioactive by any NFL teams, regardless of if he had some gas left in the tank at the wide receiver position. He was an aging receiver with off-the-field issues who was facing a court case for domestic battery. It wasn't exactly a situation teams were lining up to get involved in, so Ocho decided to start looking internationally at foreign leagues interested in giving him a chance. You see, even if it wasn't going to make him millions, Johnson was just not done with the game of football. His body was starting to give up on being able to take the hits, but he still had the speed and hands he needed. The CFL came calling for a chance to have Ocho suit up for them, and he was signed to a 2-year deal to the Montreal Alouettes. He wasn't able to get over his injury bug for most of the season, but played in 5 games, having 7 receptions for 161 yards and 1 touchdown. While this obviously wasn't the performance he had been hoping for, it wasn't like his CFL career would last long enough for anyone to notice. Before the 2015 season could get underway, he was suspended from the CFL for not reporting to their mandatory training camp. This put an end to his Canadian football career. But he still wasn't done wanting to play professional football. Outside of the CFL and NFL, there are not many real professional tackle football leagues, so Johnson ended up having to go play in the American Football League located in Mexico. He signed a 1-game contract to play for the Monterrey Fundadores, and he did play pretty well in this outing, with 3 receptions including a 41-yard touchdown in a victory for Monterrey. That was the last time Chad Johnson took the field as a professional football player. As I said, since then, he has dabbled in the world of professional soccer, but never suited up to play receiver again. I think playing in the CFL would have been a solid bet for him to get attention from an NFL team once again. But honestly, once he decided to play in the American Football League in Monterrey, I think most NFL teams knew the boat had passed on Ocho. He still is an absolute Bengals legend, holding a laundry list of franchise records. He holds records in Cincinnati for receptions, receiving yards, receiving touchdowns, yards from scrimmage, all-purpose yards, games with 100-plus yards, games with a touchdown, and career 1,000-yard receiving seasons. This puts him in an elite class for the franchise. On top of that, he made it to 6 Pro Bowls, 4 All-Pro teams, and led the league in receiving yards 1 time. In terms of all-time great rankings, he is in the top 50 for all-time receiving yards, receptions, and receiving touchdowns. While he hasn't been added to the Hall of Fame as of the time of recording this, there is debate over whether or not he should be added. The one thing that I think will hold him out of Canton is the fact he didn't have a long enough career with great seasons. When he was on the field, he was great. That is totally undeniable. However, players like Terrell Owens just had a lot longer at their peak performance level than Ocho ended up with. A lot of this isn't his fault. He was battling injuries that lowered his production, and the constant personality clashes with the Bengals certainly didn't help his targets on the field. Having to split a lot of targets with TJ Houshmandzadeh also pulled down on his overall numbers, since they were both frequently having 1,000-yard seasons. His antics off the field were entertaining, but I just don't know if being 40th all-time for receiving yards is enough to get into the Hall of Fame. I don't say this as a hater. I love Ocho, and tune into his podcast and segments on Inside the NFL. It's just the facts. Outside of being retired from the NFL, Ocho now hosts segments on television and also has one of the biggest podcasts in the world. With the Nightcap podcast he hosts with fellow NFL legend Shannon Sharpe. This podcast has seriously caused a huge career resurgence for Johnson. He wasn't struggling before by any means, but it allowed him to showcase his strong talent as a showman and create content people love to consume. He also was on the Floyd Mayweather versus Logan Paul boxing card, where he fought Brian Maxwell for 4 rounds. No one was knocked out, and the fight was declared a draw, but it was just another sport he competed in at a high level. His family also had blossomed throughout his NFL career. He has 8 children, meaning he made sure to spread his genes as far as possible. Most of his children are working towards professional careers or are still in school, so I will respect their privacy. But his son, Chad Johnson Jr., is a wide receiver for the Arizona State Sun Devils, trying to follow in his father's path to the NFL. The football talent isn't only in his immediate family. His cousin Brandon Johnson is a receiver for the Denver Broncos. Brandon made the starting roster after initially starting undrafted and went on to have several high-impact plays for the Broncos. His uncle, Charles Johnson, was a professional baseball player and played catcher for the Marlins, Dodgers, Orioles, White Sox, Rockies, and Rays. It's safe to say that this entire family just has a natural aptitude towards sports and the ability to perform anything athletic at the highest level imaginable. He got engaged in early 2023, and at this point has said he's had the crazy moments of his life and is looking to settle down and do things the right way. It doesn't stop him from having some out-of-pocket takes on his podcast. And it doesn't mean he's become some boring dad who sits in the corner muttering to himself. It just means his days of causing chaos in the NFL are over. He did display some interest in coaching in 2016, but it would probably take a very enticing offer to coach in the NFL for him to even consider walking away from nightcap. His ability to play soccer professionally alongside football just shows the type of world-class athlete that Ocho was. Do you think Ocho should be in the Hall of Fame? Let us know in the comment section if you think he deserves a bust in Canton. Seriously though, Chad Johnson is an NFL icon who entertained the league while putting up impressive statistics through most of his career. His early life wasn't the easiest, but he managed to turn it around and transform into an NFL superstar who set himself up financially to enjoy his life now. That has to be commended for just how rare it is in the modern era. If you enjoyed the video, we would appreciate you taking a moment to press the like button and let us know in the comment section what you thought of the video. If you liked this video, we post 2 football-related documentaries every week and would love your support as we try to hit 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Our last video was about why the Browns abandoned the city of Cleveland for 5 years. Consider giving it a watch, and I'll see you guys next week.